Everyone wanted to find Ghost Rider. Forums spent years dissecting every frame of footage. Swedish police even used helicopters during pursuits. Journalists dug through public records. The motorcycle world treated his identity like the final boss of internet mysteries. But nobody stopped to ask whether Ghost Rider actually wanted to be found. And more importantly, nobody asked what would happen to the legend once somebody answered that question. Because this isn't really a story about a fast motorcycle rider. This is a story about what anonymity creates, what curiosity destroys, and why some myths are worth more than the truth behind them. And it starts, weirdly enough, with an argument at a cafe. In 2002, at the Rosenhill Cafe just outside Stockholm, a group of motorcycle riders sat watching a Swedish underground video series called Getaway in Stockholm. If you were into car culture in the early 2000s, you probably remember it. High-speed car chases through the streets of the Swedish capital, police in pursuit, the whole deal. These riders thought it was garbage. In an interview with PB Motorcycling magazine, the man who would become Ghost Rider explained it pretty directly. They watched Getaway in Stockholm, and he called it fake. He said the police chase scenes were staged, that the cop was actually a bodybuilder in a costume. Whether that was entirely true is still debated, but for him it was enough. So Ghost Rider was born, basically as a massive middle finger to the car guys. That is it. That is the origin story. Not some tragic backstory, not a lifelong obsession with speed. A bunch of motorcycle dudes at a cafe decided they could do it better, and they did. The first film, Ghost Rider, the final ride, dropped in 2002. It was shot on a Sony camera, literally taped to the fuel tank of a Suzuki GSX R1000. 53 minutes of raw, unscripted, first-person footage of a rider blasting through Stockholm traffic at speeds that made the Getaway in Stockholm videos look like a Sunday drive. And here is the first beautiful irony. They called it the final ride because it was supposed to be a one-off, just one film to prove a point. The demand from the motorcycle community was so overwhelming that the final ride became the first entry in a 6-film franchise spanning nearly a decade. The title became a running joke that Ghost Rider himself never stopped laughing about. Distribution ran through Duke Video, a UK motorsport distributor, and through biker shops across Europe. But what really spread the legend was something the creators never anticipated. Pirated clips started showing up on early file-sharing networks and motorcycle forums. People were burning DVDs for their friends. Entire forum threads were dedicated to analyzing the footage frame by frame. And every single one of those viewers was watching from the perspective of someone who had no idea who was under that blacked-out helmet. That was the magic, and nobody understood that better than Ghost Rider himself. The footage that turned Ghost Rider from an underground curiosity into a global phenomenon was the Uppsala Run. If you've heard of Ghost Rider at all, this is probably why. The E4 motorway connecting Stockholm to Uppsala stretches 68 kilometers through some of the busiest highway traffic in Sweden. Ghost Rider covered that distance in 14 minutes and 55 seconds, during daytime, through active traffic averaging 273 kilometers per hour. You can actually see the speedometer in the footage. The bike is weaving between trucks, passing cars that look like they are parked, and the needle keeps climbing. He repeated the run 2 years later for Ghost Rider Goes Crazy in Europe and shaved it down to 14 minutes and 53 seconds, this time through even heavier traffic. But the Uppsala Run was just the headline act. The DVDs kept escalating in ways that felt almost comic. In Paris, he lapped the Peripherique Ring Road, the highway that circles the entire city, in 9 minutes and 57 seconds. In the Netherlands, he blasted 70 kilometers from Rotterdam to Amsterdam in 20 minutes and 32 seconds. For Ghost Rider Goes Undercover, he put on an actual Swedish police uniform, mounted up on a police-liveried Yamaha R1, and rode past real officers who then chased him through Stockholm while he dodged roadblocks. One documented police pursuit involved 6 patrol cars, 2 vans, and a helicopter. Ghost Rider lost all of them. He rode a snowmobile across bare asphalt in the middle of summer just because he could. He pulled wheelies at over 200 kilometers per hour through Stockholm tunnels, threading between tractor trailers with a margin of error measured in centimeters. And yes, he crashed, multiple times. One collision with a car crossing the road made it into the first DVD. An oil-related motorcycle crash appeared in a later film. In one incident, a loose camera reportedly jammed his front wheel at the Nürburgring. He included all of it. The crashes, the near misses, the moments where everything almost went sideways. Fans pointed to this as proof he was authentic. He never pretended to be invincible. Now, the bikes. Because for the motorcycle nerds watching this, and I know you're here, the machines were half the legend. The everyday weapon was a Suzuki GSX R1000. He ran through several year models, the K1, K4, and K5. The K4 had full carbon fiber bodywork, making it lighter and meaner than anything rolling out of Suzuki's factory. But the real showcase piece, the bike that came out for top speed demonstrations and runway wheelie segments, was a turbocharged Suzuki Hayabusa GSX 1300R built by Swedish specialist tuner MC Express. The first version was reported to produce 417 brake horsepower. Later builds pushed to a claimed 499 brake horsepower at 1.2 bar of boost, putting down 439 brake horsepower at the rear wheel on standard pump fuel. That bike was valued at over 50,000 euros, and it turned the Hayabusa from a fast production motorcycle into a cultural symbol of absolute excess. He also used a Yamaha R1, a 500 brake horsepower Kawasaki, a BMW Z3M Coupe, Subaru Impreza WRX STIs, mini bikes, and in one of the most absurd moments in the franchise, a bicycle. He rode a bicycle past police officers in full Ghost Rider leather gear just to mess with them. Here's where this story gets really interesting though, because the anonymity wasn't just cool, it was functional. Under Swedish law at the time, traffic offenders generally had to be apprehended at the scene. Think about what that means for Ghost Rider. No license plates on the bike, no visible face behind the blacked out visor, no external film crew who could be interrogated, and there are no confirmed cases of him being caught during a pursuit. The police could suspect whoever they wanted. They could be 99% certain. It didn't matter. Swedish law needed them to physically stop the rider in the act, and that simply never happened. So the blacked out visor was not just an aesthetic choice, it was a legal strategy, and it worked flawlessly for years. But the anonymity created something far bigger than legal protection. It created mythology. With no face to attach to the riding, the motorcycle community filled that void with their own imagination. And the theories were incredible. The most popular one was that Ghost Rider was not one person at all. Multiple riders, the theory went, using identical gear and identical blacked out bikes, rotating in and out to confuse police and maintain the illusion. A collective hiding behind a single persona. Some forums were absolutely convinced of this, and the theory had a certain elegant logic to it. Then there was the Iceman connection. Joachim Karlsson, known as Iceman, was a member of the Swedish wheelie team who was killed at the Isle of Man TT on May 30th, 2005. Rumors circulated that Karlsson had been one of the Ghost Riders, or possibly the Ghost Rider. This was never confirmed, but his death injected genuine tragedy into the mythology. There were death rumors too. Persistent claims that Ghost Rider himself had died in a crash in 2005. A German rider who had imitated Ghost Rider's stunts did die around that time, and the confusion between the original and the copycat fed the narrative. The real Ghost Rider would later address this on his Instagram page with a line that honestly kind of goes hard. His tagline reads simply, "Only copies have died." And then there were the stories that went completely off the rails. Some Stockholm youth apparently claimed with total sincerity that Ghost Rider could ride through walls to escape the police, that he was literally a supernatural being. When your legend gets so big that teenagers start attributing magic powers to you, you have transcended being a motorcycle rider. You have become folklore. Forum members compared him to the Stig from Top Gear and to Banksy. Anonymous figures whose hidden identity is not a limitation, but their entire source of power. One commenter on the motorcycle forum, Gixxer.com, captured it perfectly when they wrote that the legend would only continue if people continued not knowing the real identity. And that commenter was absolutely right, because the identity did come out, and the legend did change. Here is the contradiction that Ghost Rider could never escape. His anonymity was his superpower, but his ambition demanded recognition. While Ghost Rider was racing through Stockholm as an anonymous phantom, he was also chasing the Guinness World Record for the fastest motorcycle wheelie and setting additional high-speed wheelie benchmarks under his real name at a public airfield, with official timekeepers and in front of cameras. In 1999, he hit 307.86 kilometers per hour on a wheelie on a turbocharged Honda CBR 1100XX Super Blackbird at Bruntingthorpe Proving Ground in England. In 2006, he pushed a documented run to 346 kilometers per hour at Elvington Airfield in Yorkshire. He later recorded 354 kilometers per hour on the Turbo Hayabusa. These were legitimate, sanctioned runs. And the man behind them was a member of the Swedish wheelie team named Patrick Furstenhoff. It did not take a genius to connect the dots. The world's fastest wheelie rider happened to be Swedish. He happened to ride turbocharged Hayabusas. He happened to be the same person distributing Ghost Rider DVDs through his own company. Motorcycle News started asking questions, and Swedish media started digging. The first real crack came in November 2005 when Swedish men's magazine Slits published a feature describing Ghost Rider as a talkative foreign stunt rider close to 40 years old. Not a full reveal, but the walls were closing in. Then came January 14, 2009. Sweden's largest newspaper, Aftonbladet, published an investigation that changed everything. Aftonbladet had obtained unreleased Ghost Rider footage, not from a police source, from Ghost Rider's own archive. In the footage, after a high-speed chase ending on the E4, the rider pulls into a garage. The camera, still mounted to the bike, keeps recording. And on that recording, the rider peels off his leather suit, pulls on a pair of sweatpants, and his face is clearly visible. He had accidentally unmasked himself on his own camera. Stockholm Police Traffic Chief Ann Lindberg identified a 40-year-old man from the footage. When Aftonbladet called him directly, his denial was almost charming in its obviousness. He told the newspaper that the company he worked for distributed the films, but that it would be one and the same person who rides, produces, manufactures, and sells. Well, that was a bit far-fetched. Lindberg wasn't buying it. She told the paper plainly that the fact he hadn't injured a bystander was a miracle, and that the fact he was alive himself was an even bigger one. By August 2011, Motorcycle News dropped all remaining ambiguity. They published a profile identifying him by his full name, his age, 43, his occupation as a bike mechanic from Stockholm, and the fact that he had 2 kids and a nice house. And just like that, the Phantom had an address. If you are enjoying this deep dive into motorcycle culture and underground legends, hit subscribe. We cover stories like this every week. Now here is the question this whole video has been building toward. What did the reveal actually cost? Because on paper, nothing changed. The same person was still behind those DVDs. The same rider had still completed the Uppsala Run. The same hands had still controlled a 499 horsepower Hayabusa at 350 kilometers per hour on one wheel. But everything felt different. A bike mechanic from Stockholm with 2 kids and a nice house is a perfectly respectable description of a human being. It is also the exact opposite of mythology. The multiple riders theory collapsed overnight. The supernatural rumors evaporated. The projection that every viewer had placed inside that blacked-out helmet, the feeling that Ghost Rider could be anyone, could be you, was replaced by a very specific face belonging to a very specific man. The legend survived. But the mythology deflated. Ghost Rider 6.66, subtitled What the F Word, came out in 2011 after the full identification. It featured wheelies at 353 kilometers per hour and some of the most intense footage in the entire franchise. The riding was as extraordinary as ever, but the audience dynamic had shifted. You were not watching a Phantom anymore. You were watching Patrick Furstenhoff. And then came the real gut punch. Furstenhoff launched a fundraiser campaign to produce Ghost Rider 7. The goal was 100,000 euros. The campaign raised 395 euros, not 395,000, 395. Furstenhoff wrote about it with visible frustration. He said they could not make these movies anymore because 99.99% of their fans had started downloading the films instead of buying them. Think about that for a second. The same internet that had turned Ghost Rider into a global legend, the same file-sharing networks and forum threads and pirated DVDs had completely destroyed the revenue model that funded the content. The tool of his ascension became the instrument of his collapse. There's something poetic about Ghost Rider's place in history that goes beyond the riding itself. He existed in this incredibly narrow window of time. After consumer video cameras became affordable enough for one person to strap to a fuel tank. But before ubiquitous digital surveillance, license plate readers, drone tracking, and facial recognition made what he did basically impossible. He helped define and popularize first-person point-of-view motorcycle videography. That format, the rider's eye view with wind noise and engine roar, is now the foundation of the entire bike life genre on YouTube and TikTok. Every motorcycle vlogger filming themselves lane splitting or hitting a twisty mountain road is working in a format that Ghost Rider helped create. His association with the Suzuki Hayabusa permanently cemented that bike's status as the ultimate icon of street-level excess. The Swedish rock band Europe used his footage in their music video for Got to Have Faith in 2004. Journalists called him probably the most famous flaunter of road rules the world has ever seen. But the community was always split. Some riders saw him as a genius and pointed to his record. No confirmed bystanders were ever killed in his runs. Others saw a ticking time bomb. One forum member on a Hayabusa owners group captured the shift perfectly when he admitted that before he was a motorcycle rider, he thought Ghost Rider was awesome. But now, not so much. The image of that bike hitting a family minivan at 200 kilometers per hour, faster than the traffic around it, was impossible to ignore. And the broader scene did produce real casualties. A Finnish man who imported the getaway in Stockholm films killed a 9-year-old girl in Helsinki in August 2002 during a high-speed run. That tragedy hung over the entire underground racing video culture, and anyone being honest about Ghost Rider has to reckon with it. Today, Patrick Furstenhoff is alive. He's active on Instagram under multiple accounts, where his Ghost Rider presence still draws hundreds of thousands of followers. His personal page carries a bio that reads, "Riding on two wheels is like flying being free, motorcycle lover. It's more than a way of life. It's an art." He's been photographed at the Nürburgring, openly identified as Ghost Rider. He released a 20th anniversary video in 2022 and an Uppsala Run compilation in September 2025. He's not hiding anymore. He hasn't been hiding for a long time. But here's what I keep coming back to. The anonymity was the art, not the riding. Plenty of people can ride fast. Plenty of people have built turbocharged Hayabusas. What nobody else created was that specific mythology, the faceless figure in all black, appearing on European highways like an apparition, then vanishing before anyone could confirm he was real. That concept, Ghost Rider the idea, belonged to everyone who watched. And the moment it belonged to one specific person, it stopped belonging to the audience. Some legends are supposed to stay in the dark, not because the truth is disappointing, but because the mystery itself was the whole point. Patrick Furstenhoff is a skilled rider, a record holder, and by all accounts, a guy who genuinely loves motorcycles. That's admirable. But Ghost Rider was something bigger than any single person could be. Ghost Rider was the thing that happens when you put a camera on a fuel tank, black out a visor, and let an entire subculture project their wildest version of freedom onto a figure they can never identify. The police couldn't catch him. The media eventually did, and in catching him they solved a mystery that was worth more unsolved. He was the last analog outlaw. And in the age of license plate readers, facial recognition, and drone surveillance, nobody will ever be Ghost Rider again. Not because nobody is fast enough, because nobody can disappear anymore.